and welcome back. We are on the same beautiful day. In the previous episode, I walked us through essentially character generation. There is one little piece of information I left out of this process. You'll note the little phoenix icons over here. This determines whether the empires that you yourself have created can appear as AI controlled empires in a game that you play. The first option is that there's a chance. The second option is that they're guaranteed to spawn. And the third option is to lock them out. Most of these are locked out because they are behind DLC that I have currently disabled. With that, we're going to be selecting this empire that we have made bespoke, and I'm going to be walking us through general and advanced settings. Now, difficulty here. I would say that anyone who's familiar, at least in passing, with RTS games, which is how Stellaris functions in single player, would be able to easily hop in at cadet or even ensign. Civilian's very good if you're not too familiar with these sort of games. That allows you to make plenty of mistakes, sort of figure out what it is that you want to do and not get run down by the AI somewhere down the line because you've made a bunch of economy mistakes. I have 3,000 hours in this game, so I could very well play on Grand Admiral, but that would require a very specific, streamlined playstyle that I would like to sort of stretch away from a little bit. We'll be playing at Captain. Difficult enough that you sort of have to know what you're doing, but for me, it allows me to stretch out a little bit and not worry about being mega efficient with my builds. Moving on. Iron Man mode. This makes it so that the game, and I'll have it on screen so you can read for yourself. Console commands are disabled, so no cheating, and the game autosaves, so you can't save scum. And you also can't reload earlier saves. There was a time when achievements were locked behind having this turned on. I used to get around that by just closing the program when something goes the way I didn't want it to. But since then, Paradox have disabled the requirement to be in Iron Man mode. Thank you, OBS, for recording that gulp in order to get achievements. We'll be having it turned off because I might like to show off different outcomes to events and stuff that we have later on. We have very many. We have 5 options for the size of the galaxy, so we can have 200 as the most basic. Nice for short, fast games that you just sort of want to muck around about and see what's going on. Small unlocks 3 arms spiral. Medium unlocks 4 arms and a couple of other ones. Very interesting starburst, personal favourite of mine, which usually has me playing on 600. There's the cartwheel, which is kind of like a very fancy version of the spiral. And then the spoke, which is a very eccentric shape. We have large. This further expands to 6 arms. And what else is it that it unlocks? Is it just the 6 arms? I believe so, yes. So you could play on this, you could play on huge, and be playing the same save file for the next month. Entirely viable, and entirely enjoyable, in my opinion. For ease of access here, I will be playing on 400 stars, and I might not get too far into the game, but it's mostly so I can show off things and still, this might transition into a themed Let's Play at some point. Right now, my priority is just making it possible to understand what's going on in the game. Hyperlane density. This is how many roads between star systems there are. Now, logistically, there's immediate concern as to how to make a galaxy playable for a game like this. Now, for something like No Man's Sky, you can go to all these procedurally generated bespoke areas, non-bespoke. Sorry, that's not what that means. Uh, for the purposes of what this game is, which is essentially expansion and consolidation and political interfacement, this is how they sort of justify the constraints there. Because obviously there are several billion stars in a galaxy, but we only have access to 1,000 or so because only those ones are connected through this hyperlane network. There is a chance to get FTL technology, I think, but it's very finicky, and the game doesn't concern itself with that too much. AI empires. I think, could we maybe do? I'm going to increase the density just slightly for no particular reason. This determines how many empires are going to spawn in. For our game, I'm going to have it randomized, but I'm also going to put the floor at 4. Have 8 of them come in. Advanced AI starts. Now, this is essentially when you start the game, most of the other empires in the game will be starting at year 0 as well. So they're taking their first foray into interstellar space and building their ships and claiming outposts and stuff. Advanced AI starts get to behave as though they've been around for a couple of decades and are a little bit further along in their technology developments. Because this is a slightly larger galaxy, we can afford to play with 2 advanced starts, but we will be playing with advanced neighbors as somewhere in this menu off, so they can't spawn next to us, because that would probably determine very quickly the kind of playstyle that we will have to abide by for the early game. And I'd like to avoid that for the most part. 2 of them, they can spawn in at different areas in the galaxy and not become a nuisance too fast. Fallen empires. These are precursor civilizations that have not yet crumbled to dust, but are instead stagnant civilizations. They're kind of just hanging around and kicking rocks, really. So those 2 will be static. We'll have 2 advanced and 2 fallen empires. They don't behave like normal empires. They sort of just are there as part of the set dressing, and they occasionally behave one way or another towards you, depending if you fall upon their favor or their ire, which is usually determined by their ethics. Crisis type. This is challenges that come up at the end, towards the end of the game, before the victory year, that are sort of existential, intergalactic level threats. So, kind of test your mettle against those once everyone's built up all of their technology and the board is mostly made. This will shake things up again a little bit before all is said and done. Scaling difficulty. Now, this will determine, you have the difficulty adjusted AI modifiers. Technologies that the AI unlocks will give them more resources percentage wise than it will give us. Again, saying the AI is not good at playing the game, so they get a couple of cheats to remain viable as contenders and opponents to challenge the player. Scaling difficulty determines how fast that 20% becomes 40%. So, because I've set it to mid-game, 50 years in, it will be creeping fast, and by year 50, they will have the full 40% bonus, which also applies to all future technologies that they unlock. AI aggressiveness, we will be going with normal. If you have a militaristic empire or determined exterminators, this determines how likely it is that they're going to declare war on you as soon as they get a bird's eye view on you. Logistic growth ceiling. Okay, this one is a little bit strange. The scales pop growth based on the number of pops in the empire. The higher it is, the slower the pop will grow. How the population growth bonuses are. So growth required. Let's use flat percentage bonuses here. If you have 100 population, or let me collect my thoughts for a second here. It's quite complicated. And getting towards the population cap of a planet, between, say that you're halfway there, this determines how high the bonuses to population increase are at that point. Growth required scaling means that you require less population overall to reach higher bonuses. That's the most simplest way that I can explain it, because it's a little bit fiddly and very mathematically inclined. Technology and tradition cost. This determines how much science research you require at one point to fully develop a technology, and tradition is likewise how much unity you require to determine to have your civilization agree upon a order of operations going forward, like a particular way of doing things. They are permanent bonuses. Fleet upkeep logistic costs and planetary deficit logistic costs. Now, you will understand one if I explain the other. Say you have two planets. One is a bunch of solar farms producing energy, and the other is a giant mining operation producing mining. These planets are likewise deficient in minerals and deficient in energy. The hidden cost or a process of transporting those resources to one another planets is represented by an upkeep rolling upon another resource called trade. You must spend trade to facilitate the transfer of resources. That is what that represents. Transfer speed is relating to how fast the save file is synchronized in multiplayer. So we don't need to worry about that for the purposes of this. Habitable world determines how many planets are viable as colonies in the galaxy. If you turn this up, you will have no shortage and can send colony ships left and right. We'll be playing with this only slightly increased. Pre-FTL civilizations and pre-sapient species. Pre-FTL are anywhere between Stone Age and Spacefaring Age, with, if you roll back, the Atomic Age, the Industrial Age, etc., Renaissance. Pre-sapient species are species that have not yet reached the Stone Age but show promising cognitive abilities. Real-world examples you might think of corvids or dolphins, or I think badgers are a contender, actually. A lot of the smaller mammals are quite intelligent. Well, medium-sized, sort of cat-sized and above. The ones smaller than that don't tend to. The rats are. It's sort of, it's complicated. Advanced. Is it this one? Empire placement, yes. So you can do clusters where they get to fight, trade, and make friends with each other, and they spawn quite close together, or you can have them just completely random. So someone might be 2 systems away, or you might not have anyone within 20 systems. We'll be going with clusters. Advanced neighbors. No, thank you. I don't want to run into those until well into the game when I've had time to establish myself. But their neighbors might not be so lucky. Now we come to gateways and wormholes at the same time. Wormholes are naturally occurring phenomena which are kind of like uh, you have a wormhole entrance in one part of the galaxy and another in the other part of the galaxy. These two are connected, but are a single discrete open and exit system. So you can go in and come out one end and vice versa. Gateways are similar, but they can become interconnected. So you can have three gateways connected, but you can only ever have two wormholes connected to each other. Gateways are also a technology you can potentially unlock down the line, but I think that specifically is locked through a DLC. You can find them naturally occurring in the game, however. Guaranteed habitable worlds. We're starting on an ocean planet. This means that we have a guaranteed chance to find another ocean planet or two ocean planets nearby, and that makes the early game a little bit quicker. I personally like to play with this off because I feel that it is more realistic and fun that you will not immediately find guaranteed habitable worlds, and that sort of determines, okay, I need this technology to make it viable to live in this environment, sort of thing. The precursors. You can find various archaeological dig sites as you're doing your surveys of different systems and such. And once you get far enough into quest lines, you get various bonuses and lore according to the specific precursor that you find. I think this determines within a game there are several precursors that you can find the evidence of. This determines say that you have different empires can find different dig sites concurrently, essentially, but you'll only ever have one at the same time for one empire, unless you have a mod to offset that. So while we're researching the Voltaeum, another empire might be going through the quest line to figure out what's going on with the First League. And finally, game length. Mid-game start year, we're going to have this at 20 to 50, so 50 years into the game. We can do this because the technology and tradition costs are quite truncated. I would put these lower, but I don't want technologies being spam unlocked because I may want to address some of them, and that's going to be a lot of information to go through. This game's quite dense in a good way. End game start year, so we'll have 50 years. Let's say another 75 years to the end game start, where the intergalactic crises can start spawning as extension level threats, and then the victory year will be 100 years after the end game, and I think that's quite fair. With that, I'll do a little preview, and we'll get into our starting system. My goodness. There we go. So we are in the galaxy screen. The Rec administration. Prosperous unification. In the I'm going to read this out, keep it a part of this video, and then I'm going to insert it into the next video to sort of prime us for what's going on. But this is a nice little sort of preview of what's to come. In the eons since the first primitive Rek'Valar communities took shape in the archipelagos and lagoons of Rekomak, our civilization has spread and prospered. We were driven forward by steady scientific progress, and armed conflicts between nation-states became increasingly rare. The framework for a global democratic government was eventually laid, and when the last holdouts voluntarily joined, we stood united as a single nation. Now, after the discovery of the hyperlane network, the finest minds of the Direct Valaran administration have finished development of the first hyperdrives. The stars themselves are finally within our grasp. What a lovely thing. With that, we begin, and by clicking that, it drops us into our home system. We'll get into this next time, but you can already see that there's quite a lot to contend ourselves with. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I'll see you for the next episode of this as I walk through essentially our first steps into this game. A very fabulous Excel spreadsheet with a graphical user interface. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye bye now.